Hello, today we're talking about Discovering Language, Chapter 6, Semantics. And I wanted to discuss with you some of the terms that appear here to clarify their meaning, right? She starts, well, before, let me introduce you to her. This is Leslie Jeffries. She has written many books on language. She has written books on, well, Discovering Language is one of them. Also, Opposition in Language. And there's another book called Stylistics, right? Apart from many others, right? She's written many books. And she wants to discuss several topics related to meaning. But there's one thing she says on page 157 that I would like you to remember. Interestingly, language is not constrained to being true, but can be used to propose both falsehoods of this kind that she was talking about, and also fantastic and unlikely scenarios, right? So be careful because language can lie, right? By the way, the word scenarios, there was recently an entry from Fundeo about the word scenario used in Spanish. Okay, she starts talking about pragmatic meaning, right? And for this, I am using another dictionary on linguistics by Katie Wales, right? And she tells us that pragmatics comes from pragma, which is deed in Greek. This is a word of Greek origin. Usually we use pragmatic, here you get the definition for pragmatic, as being down to earth, right? Relating to matters of fact or practical affairs, often to the exclusion of intellectual or artistic matters. And you speak of pragmatic men of power, sexist dictionary indeed. But being pragmatic then mostly to us means being down to earth, right? And actually, she's referring to a field within linguistics which links meaning to context, right? So we study maybe semantics, we study lexis, but when we think of pragmatics, we think how language applies to the context. So Katie Wales in her dictionary says, if somebody asks, can you drive a car? Well, the meaning may vary if the person is a woman, the person is a man, the person is young, underaged, or whatever, right? So the meaning will depend on the context. We won't be referring to the concept of pragmatic meaning a lot, right? In this sense, mostly in the other sense of being down to earth, right? But anyway, the term might come up. Now, the next topic is multiple meaning, and I wanted you to check, be careful with the word multiple, múltiple. En castellano no lo usamos tanto porque por lo general se ve como opuesto a simple. Sí también puede tener el significado de muchos, pero no lo usamos con esta frecuencia. Es decir, que acá hay un false friend alert, right? Cuando vemos la palabra múltiple, rara vez vamos a pensar en múltiples, sino en sencillamente muchos, right? When she starts talking about multiple meaning, she will talk about the difference between figurative and referential meaning, something we will pick up later. But for this, I have this example. If you think of a door, well, of course, you're thinking about the object, but then if you think about the idioms that we have with a door, for example, beat a path to somebody's door, it is very frequent, right? It's a very nice idiom. Top theatrical agents are beating a path to the teenager's boy. This refers to people really trying to get him because he's so successful. We tend to use this expression also in the negative, right? Well, people aren't beating a path to his door to say that he's not successful, right? And then you can also find other idioms like, sorry, I wanted not to somebody's doors, but to open doors, right? And in both cases, you can see that the concept of a door is there, but we're thinking figuratively, right? We're not thinking of the actual object, but rather what it refers to. Then Leslie Jeffers starts talking about homonymy, which is a process that is very important that we're going to check right now. We're going to check these words in Merriam-Webster. Remember, if you have seen the video for dictionaries, maybe this dictionary will offer terms that are simpler, that are less and frequently for learners of English, right? If you want to search something academic, maybe you'd be best advised to use Merriam-Webster. Now, there is a bit of a circular definition of homonymy. Says that it means being a homonymous. Thank you very much. And from homonymous, you go to of or relating to being homonyms. And finally, sorry, I went too fast. Finally, we get there, homonym, and we have three categories, right? We have homophones, homographs, and homonyms per se, I would say, right? The examples are very clear. These terms are very easy, I would say. A homophone is a word that has the same sound, but different spelling, like there and there. By the way, Merriam-Webster has a very nice video about this. A homograph, on the other hand, has the same spelling, lead, as in the metal, and lead as in the verb, so we have the same spelling but different pronunciation. And finally, sometimes there are one or two more words spelled and pronounced alike but with different meaning, like quail the noun and quail the verb. Quail would be an animal, right? And the verb to quail as in complain. Here she offers many other terms, right, that are very useful. These also in Spanish. But basically what matters about this is that this creates a lot of room for punning. Yes, that's what she tells us, right? So we need to be very careful, right? Now, remember then that homonymy, all the examples appear on page 160, refers to words that they have the same spelling and the same pronunciation, and they have a different meaning. And this is going to overlap with the concept of polysemy. We're not going to get into that because I think that is a philosophical question that doesn't really merit our attention, right? So here you have the example of ring as the verb to phone or the sound, but also ring as a mark or simply a piece of jewelry, right? So we have the exact same word, right? We have things like that in Spanish, right? Remember something like haya, H-A-Y-A, como árbol o como el verbo hacer, right? Balde, una cubeta o en vano, right? Bueno, y muchos otros. Now, the examples that she provides are really good for homophones. You have bare, illicit, allowed, paste, and hostile. And this actually leads to a pronunciation issue, right, about the difference between American and British English. Maybe for you it is difficult to see that all of these words that appear on page 161 are pronounced in the exact same way, right? Paste and paste, right? The liquid and the action of walking have the same pronunciation. And hostile and hostile, it sounds a bit different, but in British English would have the same pronunciation, but in American English this would become hostile, right? There are many other words that have this difference in pronunciation, right? Okay, moving on to, I don't remember the examples right now. Moving on to homographs. Also here, I think that you can see the exact same spelling on page 162, but I wonder if you get the different pronunciation, particularly because the stress is missing, right? Now, an invalid is a person, and it is a noun, and invalid is an adjective, and it tells that something is no longer valid, right? Moped, the noun, and moped, the past of the verb to mope. A row and a row. Sewer and a sewer, right? Sorry, a sewer and a sewer here, right? So a person who sews as opposed to the pipes. Okay, the next concept that she's going to discuss is that of polysemy, and as I said, we're going to skip that because I am not interested. What I am interested in is the next topic, which is semantic fields, and for this, I give you here there are more homophones. Sorry, let's have a look at the other homophones by Merriam-Webster, like two, and two, right? Different spelling, but same pronunciation. And for homographs, the dictionary gives you bow, the bow of a ship, and bow and arrow, right? So bow and bow. Okay, let me see if we have something else here. No, we'll get to that in a moment. We'll skip the nut thing here. We'll get here in a minute. And I wanted to go here, which is, well, not componential analysis. I wanted to check first semantic fields, right? Sorry. And the concept of semantic fields is something that is dated. Wait. And semantic fields refers to, sorry, I cannot find it, refers to the words that, here it is actually, right? Semantic field theory refers to the words that relate to the same field. So, for example, one example is, sorry about the repetition, sprinting, trotting, and jogging would belong to the field of types of running, right? Now, on many occasions, she's going to discuss this later, I think, if I'm not mistaken. When you speak of a field, yes, that's on page 166. People thinking about words that are related in the sense that they're similar, such as ways of running, right? These are the examples she provides: ways of running, ways of walking. And actually, when we talk about a semantic field, we refer to, nowadays, we refer to all the words that relate to one topic, right? So we speak of the field of war being used for medicine, as in to combat a disease. So to combat is something that is a word that appears normally in the field of war, but it's being used in the field of medicine, basically to achieve a specific meaning, right? Because of its connotation, right? Because the idea is that you're fighting. So we'll sort of think of semantic field as, notice that I'm skipping something. We're on page 166. In semantic, we think of semantic field as a larger area, right? And I think there's nothing else I want to discuss from what she says. So we're going to go to the point that I skipped, which is componential analysis, right? This is on page 165, and when she talks about componential analysis, I would like you to go to the very bottom of the page, where she describes the components, the sort of ingredients to the meaning of laugh. It is human communication. It is vocable and audible. I blended the words. Non-linguistic, and it means to show pleasure or amusement. It's a way of describing the meaning of a word by thinking of its, as I said earlier, its ingredients or components. And I was actually showing you here in this encyclopedia, the Routledge Linguistics Encyclopedia, another reference to componential analysis. Sorry. And here, for example, man can be described as being human, adult, and male, right? So when we think of componential analysis, we think of components. Now, once again, in the same way that when somebody thought of the concept of field, now we use it in a different manner. More or less the same happens with componential analysis, at least with me. When we are analyzing the meaning of a word, maybe I will say something like, well, there's an element of humor in this word, right? Or this word adds a sense of fear, whatever. So in that case, I'm referring to some components of the meaning of a word, right? All right, now we're going to move on to sense relations. And for sense relations, I would like to remind you that there are videos here, right? Particularly dictionaries number 2 that tells you how we organize definitions, right? How we actually write definitions. Now, sense relations are 4. We have here synonymy, antonymy, hyponymy, and meronymy. Now, as regards synonymy, that's very easy, right? Because it's a synonym, and a synonym is a word that has a similar meaning. You very well know that there aren't any true synonyms, because if we have 2 words, there's a reason for that, and that's where the argument between convince and persuade comes from. If the 2 words are the same, why do we have 2 words, right? For this, I have a little bit of a joke. You know that in English we have many words to refer to animals. For example, we have the words pig, sheep, calf, cow, and deer. And these are the names of the animals. But if we think about eating them, we think about their meat, we think about pork, mutton, seal, beef, and venison. Sorry. Why is that? Well, it's funny in the sense that they're not synonyms actually, because one of them is the animal and the other one is the food. But what is funny about them is that all the words that are eaten, if you will, are the words that came from French. So English eats French, and you know that that's something that probably pleases some people. All right. So as I was saying, there are very few real synonyms. Sometimes we think about calendar and almanac, but whenever there are 2 words that refer to the same thing, there is a slight difference, right? Sometimes we use them, and actually the dictionary uses to provide a definition, but they're not the same. And for this, I remember another example about a lexicographer saying that something was baffling, or at least perplexing. And if you look up the 2 words, baffle and perplex, actually they are synonymous, right, in a certain way. Only that baffle seems to be a word of Anglo-Saxon origin, whereas though it may have come through Latin, and perplexing seems more maybe more transparent to Spanish ears, right? Now, even though they are synonymous, or somewhat synonymous, the writer went baffling, or at least perplexing. Clearly, the writer was trying to convey that baffling was more confusing than perplexing, right? So, as you can see, we'll never come across real synonyms. Then we come to the other category, which is hyponymy, and I would like you to see hyponymy and meronymy as, please watch the video, right? Video, which is dictionaries number 2. And I would like you to see these 2 categories as rather similar. The only difference is that within hyponymy, the larger category is referred to as superordinate. You can also use the term hypernym, which is a word we use in Spanish, hiperónimo, but in English we prefer superordinate, because hyponym is the same as hyponym. The spelling is different, so clear these are homophones, right? Hypernym, Hyper, hypernym is the same as superordinate. Now, a superordinate category, as I explained in the other video, or as you can see maybe on page 171 at the bottom, you have an example of the superordinate relative that has two co-hyponyms, and in this case the spelling is Hyponymi, and the two co-hyponyms would be one generation above, same generation, right? And for the superordinate parent, there are two co-hyponyms, which are mother and father. The other similar category is meronymy, right? And in this case, the only difference is that the meronym, the larger category, is also a noun, not necessarily actually, it needn't be just a noun, but it refers to the entity you're discussing as the whole, right? And the it's the holonym, right? The larger category is the holonym, spelled Holonym, holonym, and the members of that category are co-meronyms, now meronyms, co-meronyms, and these actually are part of the whole, part of the holonym, and usually they have different functions, right? Different roles, or they're different for some reason. So if you think about a house, you will think about different rooms, and there will be bedrooms, but there will be a kitchen, a bathroom, and they all clearly have different uses, right? And if you think about a company, you will also have different structures within, maybe physical, maybe human structures, whatever, but they all relate to one another as being part of fulfilling a certain role or a certain function, right? She gives here the example of body parts, or maybe the hand and all the fingers. Each finger would be a co-meronym, and hand would be a holonym. Finally, the question of oppositeness, which is, or antonymy, which is a more technical name, is actually very interesting. She explains to us that, wait, before I go on, I wanted to show you that here we saw diacritics in the video about pronunciation. I think it was dictionaries number 3, and here you have another way of looking at a category that is a holonym, right? The larger category, and its co-meronyms, the acute accent, the grave, the circumflex, the tilde, the macron or macron, the breve, hatchek, diaeresis, umlaut, and cedilla, right? This is a clear example of a holonym and its co-meronyms, each having a different function. So as I was saying, let's go to antonyms, which are very, very interesting. They can be classified into 4 categories. I am on page 174. We can have complementaries, grade double antonyms, converses, and directional opposites. Complementaries are the ones that, as it says here, are mutually exclusive. So you're either male or female. You're either dead or alive. Something is true or not. Well, that depends, right? On opinion, of course. So the next category is grade double antonyms, and as it says here, they are at the end of a spectrum. So you have hot and cold, big and small, so it can be bigger or smaller, right? There's something in between, good or bad, dirty and clean. Converses they show a relationship, as it says here, that present the different perspective of the same situation. So you either buy or sell, borrow or lend. You're a husband or wife. You're a teacher or student, right? Very similar are the last category, which is directional or reversive, because they do show these two ends, but they see them as a process, right? So you button or unbutton, enter or leave, marry or divorce, right? Okay, let me just check. The next category, wait, before we move on, why is this classification important? Because as actually Leslie Jeffries says in her book on opposition, she has written a whole book on opposition. One thing is the opposition we see in language as it occurs in everyday life, the way we just saw it here as live or die, or truth or lie. Quite another as it is set up by texts, right? Texts tell us the meaning of a word in context. Remember just now the example about baffle and perplex. Outside the context, they would be synonymous, but in a text, they're not, right? So that's why these lexical relations are so important. We'll see them in when we analyze the text, right? Okay, the next point is collocation, and for this we have this beautiful dictionary that gives us all the collocations there are for the word myth, right? And you can find the typical verb that occurs with the verb myth, which is debunk. Now notice that this dictionary has, I mean, all these dictionaries of collocations are the result of computers, right? And being able to load loads and loads and loads and loads of text, which involves both written and spoken, into corpora, right? This is a good example of a corpus. Corpora is the plural, and notice that actually debunk is not here. Oops, yes, it's not here, right? They do not provide that context for myth, but to do dispel a myth. And remember, here is when you can see the results of the British national corpus. I insist, spoken and oral, and uses of dispelling a myth, right? These are very useful, right? We have these dictionaries in Spanish, fortunately. Ask your translation teachers. As far as I know, this doesn't exist in French or in German. So if you know, please let me know. Now, what is a collocation? Leslie Jeffrey says something that is very important. She says that it's a question of selectional restriction. And that is very interesting because a collocation stems from the fact that two words collocate or coexist, right? She also refers to statistical co-occurrences. What is that? Well, they simply appear together, right? When we want to destroy a myth, we can say destroy, but we can also say debunk a myth, right? That's simply something that happens, and it happens because people use it a lot, right? Now, what is interesting is something that she mentions. While there is this tendency to occur, and this is just an accident of usage, there might be something that is anomalous. And that is very interesting, right? When somebody doesn't use the right context, or the right collocation for a word, it becomes anomalous and it becomes odd. And this may be purposeful or not. We don't know, right? But it does tell us something about the speaker, all right? Okay, finally, the concept of connotation, which is, I know, one that possibly doesn't complicate your life. Remember that you have a booklet that I have uploaded on Dropbox. It's called the Decarbone, and it tells you all the instructions for our class, and it also has a nice glossary, and you have a glossary for connotation, and its opposite would be denotation, right? So because it is an either or relationship, which opposite is it? You tell me. Now, there are synonyms for connotation, right? Sometimes we speak of connotation or affective meaning, extended meaning, associative meaning, attitudinal meaning, emotive, subjective, or figurative. All of this in the video that is called figurative or literal, right? It is somewhere there. Where is it? There, okay? And also there are many synonyms for denotation as referential, denotational, cognitive, conceptual, literal, and ideational. What are we talking about? We're talking about what we said at the beginning. Remember the difference between a door, a real door, a referential door, as opposed to a symbol, right? Something that represents an opening, a new life, or an obstacle. Remember in the two expressions that we saw, beat a path to your door. The door would be something that in a way is an obstacle, whereas in open doors, it is actually a new life, right? Remember, in Spanish, we also use the terms figurado y el opuesto es propio, sentido propio o figurado. Okay, as regards connotation, the last point I wanted to make was here. Remember that if we go to the Oxford Learner's Dictionary, we go to resources, right? Resources home, this is home. You can go to the guides and to symbols and labels, and here you will find some sort of connotations of certain words, right? When a word is taboo or slang or offensive, this is part of the connotation of the word, something that the word brings with it, right? And I want to mention this because actually there is a huge cultural difference at some point. You know, for example, in English we speak of the F word, right? And that tells you how much possibly Americans are upset by that term, and they won't use it as freely as Argentines do all the time, right? Also, I would like to say in the sense that we have also the question of a word being informal, and for this I want to say that usually students of translation or teacher training speak what I call TV English, right? TV English is the language that you have learned because you watch a lot of TV, and that's fantastic. But please remember, that's not the only English that exists, right? There is specialist language, which is the one you're learning here in particular, right? There's literary language also that you will be learning in the context of not just in language, but also in other classes, right? And this formal language, okay? Okay, so that is all for chapter 6.